more evidence that Hillary Clinton is very similar in disposition to Barack Obama. Bill Clinton basically tells us how Hillary Clinton will attempt to shift her position on the TPP. Now, what's interesting here, there's two things I want you to look at. Or maybe two or three things I want you to keep in mind as you watch this clip. One is Hillary Clinton has said, I will not sign TPP as configured now, right? Implying that there would have to be changes to the TPP to make it more palatable. I don't think that, and I haven't gotten an answer from anybody about this, but I don't think that's possible. I don't think that's possible because it's already been signed off by all the countries. You're not going to go back in and renegotiate it. So notice that what Bill Clinton talks about in terms of changes to the TPP, he's talking about legislation that would be passed in this country only that would mitigate supposedly the negative impacts of TPP. Now, for a lot of people who complain about the TPP, it's not just in this country. What it does is it creates baselines and empowers things like, Hollywood or particularly pharmaceuticals around the world in a way that is unhealthy and ultimately would double back here. The other thing is that when he talks about corporate taxes and repatriation, he makes a point of saying, like, I'm just speaking for myself here. He didn't say the same thing in TPP, which is also interesting and worth noting. And the other thing that struck me was that, because I covered this in real time, the 2004 or 2005 U.S. was it Jobs for America Act? That's what it was called. But basically what it said is that the money that corporations, U.S. corporations, had been hiding offshore, not hiding, but just maintaining offshore, waiting for an act that would allow them to repatriate the money at a tax level that was lower than their normal tax rate. George Bush passed that, and what happened was even the companies that were lobbying for it not only did not use that to create new jobs, they laid off, in some instances, like tens of thousands of people. Maybe I think it was HB, 15,000, I can't remember. And basically used all that money to either buy back shares or to provide dividends to their shareholders. But it's interesting because Clinton says that George Bush was surprised by this. Maybe he was. I don't know. It struck me. So watch this clip.
What do you think about TPP? Because a lot of people look at that as the legacy for NAFTA.
Well, first of all, I don't think it has anything to do with NAFTA, but I think that the geopolitical reasons for it, from America's point of view, are pretty clear. That it's designed to make sure that the future of the Asia-Pacific region economically is not totally dominated by China. I think it's pretty clear what Hillary said about it, and that is that there needs to be provisions on currency manipulation that are enforced, and there need to be, again, measures put in place in America so that we take care of whatever dislocation ever happens simultaneously. Everybody makes nice about doing something about it, and then, at least for the last 20 years, for most of the time, Congress never wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And you just can't do that. It's not true. In places, especially where there's physical isolation, the market economy will not make up the difference unless there is a real investment or a real investment incentive or both.
What's the right corporate tax rate?
Okay, pause it for 1 second. I just want to jump in here to say one of those guys who was saying, like, we're going to fix, we're going to mitigate. You know, they said, like, for 20 years people have been talking about that. That 20 years that he's talking about goes back to when he basically they passed NAFTA, and he said, like, we're definitely going to take care of the environmental and the labor stuff afterwards. Well, yeah, it didn't happen. And shockingly, it was the Republicans in Congress who prevented that, according to Bill Clinton. But at least this time around, if Clinton signs TPP, we can rely on the Republicans who control Congress now to really address those things after the fact. So we got that going for us. But let's hear what he says about corporate taxes.
Right corporate tax rate to make sure that you're bringing in income, but also incentivizing businesses to be investing here in America? Is it 15%? Is it 35%? Is it somewhere in between?
I was the president who urged it to be raised to 35%.
Pause it for one more second.
But when
Let me just show you also something about that question. The idea that the tax rate incentivizes, the tax rate itself incentivizes businesses to invest here in America, just the framing of that question is so full of crap. The tax rate is not the issue as to why they don't invest in America. They're not going to invest in America unless what they mean is buy back their stocks and increase the value of the stock portfolio of the board of directors and the CEO and perhaps the shareholders, which would also drive up the value of the stocks, which would also then increase the value of the portfolio of the shareholders of the board of directors and the CEO. Now, and I say this as someone who is, I don't know, I'm somewhat agnostic about maintaining a specific corporate tax rate, but just the way that they frame this is ludicrous.
the president who urged it to be raised to 35%. But when I did it, it was precisely in the middle of the OECD countries. It isn't anymore. So I think it should be lowered. This is just me now, I'm not speaking for you. I think it should be lowered, and we should do sort of what the Japanese did. We should try to get it as close to the international average as we can, so we'll be competitive. But we ought to have an alternative minimum so everybody pays something that's acceptable, and you don't have to worry about finding every last tax shelter and every last dodge and every last this, that, and the other thing. Just say, do that. And then I would like to see a repatriation initiative that works a little bit different than it did when President Bush signed one. This is one actually where he's probably has a more liberal position than I do because he got so mad that he signed the 5 3/4% repatriation bill, and he said none of it was reinvested. It was all stock buybacks, stock buybacks and everything. I think we should allow some repatriation if X percent of the money, whatever it is, some percent, goes into buying investments in the National Infrastructure Program. If we have some infrastructure bank or whatever, because we can create a lot of jobs and we need to raise a lot of money, and the government doesn't have it all, so we're going to have to get private investment. This is not rocket science, and it shouldn't be considered theology. This is a practical problem that we should do whatever is necessary to maximize job growth in America.
Yeah, I mean, this is like when I see like Clinton talk like this, it reminds me how much more I dislike him than her, frankly. I was never one of those people. That would be great. That would be great if we had repatriation and we would insist that, okay, so you only have to pay, instead of a 35% tax rate, let's say you only have to pay a 12% tax rate as an alternate minimum tax for the corporation. So you don't have to find tax shelters, this and that. You don't spend any money on that. You just pay this. You'll be happy to pay 12%. You don't have to spend any money. You don't have to give 10% to those tax shelter guys who are going to save you $600 million. So you pay 12%, you pay 20% or 18%, whatever it is. And then as long as the money that you bring back, instead of giving it all to shareholders, you spend X percent would go into some type of infrastructure bank that would help you, but would also help the country. I would put the chances of everything after we lower the tax rate of that proposal, everything that came after we lower the tax rate, and then everything following tax rate, That's not going to happen. The first part, that will happen. And I don't know if Bill Clinton knows that or doesn't know that or just thinks that, like, it's okay for me to support these things because I'm just, being academic and blah, blah, blah. But, that was what, when Kennedy lowered the tax rate, they were, from the top marginal tax rate, which at that time was 90% for every dollar over, I think what would be around the equivalent of $3 million today. 90% of every dollar that you made after $3 million was taxed. And I don't even know if they had a separate capital gains special, where that money that you make by not working is actually preferred, gets a preferred tax rate. But they did close some loopholes and deductions. Reagan ostensibly was going to do that in 86 when he dropped it. Except for guess what happened to all those loopholes and those deductions? They went away for about, 9 months. And then they came back, probably in time for the following tax season. Maybe even before then. Maybe they were retroactive.
I have a couple of different options here. I could pivot away from the question, not undermine my wife's campaign, or I could back TPP and go in a long, meandering answer. That will reinforce corporate tax cuts and loopholes. I'm going to go with B.
He is not helpful to her at all. He has always been a better surrogate for anybody other than Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, weird that.
I mean, he was incredible for Obama in 2012, regardless of what you think of him. But he had that one moment where he was like, private equity's great. Mitt Romney's an amazing guy. Oh, right.
There was also
Actually,
that
it's
moment
not good.
where he went up to Paul Ryan behind, in the wings of a thing. He was like, we should talk about how we can gut Medicare. I'm paraphrasing.
We need to get together on this. You want a veggie wrap?
Hey, folks, Sam Seder here. I just got back from a company-wide meeting. Accounting is really coming down on me hard. We need to get to 100,000 subscribers as soon as possible. So please, enjoy this channel. Subscribe. Right up. Right down there.